a dark night, lit only by the dancing flames of a great bonfire, a skald stands before the tribe, his eyes shining with the energy of a legend about to be revealed. He begins to narrate, his voice deep and full of mystery, as if the winds themselves had whispered this story over the centuries. Sit down, warriors, for I tell you a story of divine blood, honor, and intertwined destinies. There, in the forgotten mountains, where the wind howls as if carrying the laments of the gods, a forbidden son was born. He was not of ordinary flesh and bone, no. Young Halfdan, illegitimate son of Tyr, the god of justice and war, had the power of his father, but the weight of his origin condemned him to live in the shadows. His mother, a mortal shield maiden of great courage, hid him from the wrath of the giants, who wished to take his life, for the blood of Tyr ran in her veins. To him, the land he trod was like a battlefield, and the secret of his lineage a burden. From his birth, he was trained in secret by an elder devoted to Tyr, who taught him the arts of combat, the runes of protection, and the value of honor, although the young man did not know that Tyr himself, the god of war, was in his bones. The skald pauses, his eyes fixed on his listeners, before continuing, his voice filled with a tension that only an epic story could provide. But, like the tides that cannot be contained, the threat rose. The giants, with their ancient fury, threatened to invade Midgard, and it was then that Halfdan's fate became intertwined with that of the 9 kingdoms. His blood, marked by the divinity of Tyr, was the only hope against the Jötunns, monsters of unmatched size and strength. And so, the young hunter was called to face the greatest battle of his life. However, as every warrior knows, the true fight is not against the enemy ahead, but against the ghosts of the past. And what Halfdan would discover about his father, the god who guided justice and honorable battles, would put his own honor to the test. He leans forward, as if inviting everyone to come closer, and says in a low voice full of meaning, "Now, travelers, listen carefully, for the real question is how he would respond to the weight of the truth. For, amidst steel and flesh, Halfdan would face a dilemma greater than any sword could cut, a battle not only against giants, but against the honor of his own blood. And in the final fight, he would have to decide, would he follow in his father's footsteps or make his own history, even if it meant losing himself in the darkness?" The bitter wind of the frozen lands of Jotunheim seemed to howl in secret, as if the gods themselves were whispering ancient secrets, as an unexpected story took shape. It was a jealously guarded secret, a forbidden moment that should never have happened, but that was destined to alter the course of many destinies. Tyr, the god of justice and honorable battles, the strong arm of Asgard, was not immune to the impulses that inhabit the hearts of men. In a moment of fragility, he found himself before a mortal warrior, a shield maiden of great courage and unusual beauty, with eyes of a rare ferocity, capable of defying even the gods themselves. Her name was Astrid, daughter of fishermen, but with a soul that refused to be imprisoned by the tranquility of the sea. The winds of a cold night carried the encounter between the two. Astrid was on a mission, bringing news of an imminent attack by the Jötunns, the giants that inhabited the mountains of ice. She walked through the fields with the firmness of a warrior, but with the gentleness of a woman who understood the beauty and weight of the world. Tyr, on his way to Asgard, crossed her path unexpectedly. He, the god who had been considered unbeatable, the bearer of the sword who spoke in the name of justice, found himself captured by Astrid's purity. Their encounter was brief but intense. One night, a forbidden passion, which could bring as much destruction as salvation. That night, the skies were covered with heavy clouds, and the moon seemed to hide, perhaps out of shame for what had happened. without knowing what the future would hold for her. Astrid carried in her womb the seed of a divine being, a child who was the son of a god, but destined to live in mortality. She could not count on the protection of the gods, for her love was condemned, and her son would be persecuted if the truth were revealed. So she took refuge in the hills, in the hideout of a wise old man who, in turn, was loyal to Tyr and aware of the threats the young baby would face. But, like every strong and warrior woman, Astrid surrendered herself to her destiny, to the sacrifice that life imposed on her. The birth was difficult, painful. For hours, Astrid's cries of pain and prayers echoed in the cold air. And when the baby, with his pale skin and fiery hair, finally took his first breath, his mother's life was extinguished like a candle that is extinguished in the wind. Astrid left the world with a broken heart, knowing that her journey would not be complete, but that, at least, she had given the world something great, a son who would carry the essence of Tyr and who, one day, would be more than a mere mortal. The wise old man, charged with protecting the baby, took him to a small fishing village in Midgard, an isolated village where the waves crashed against hard rocks and the houses were made of aged wood. The village was simple, like the sea that surrounded it, and the fishermen were men of few words, but with great wisdom in their hearts. Young Halfdan, named in honor of the great Tyr, was raised under the watchful eye of an old man who, despite the hardships of his life, never stopped loving and teaching. This man, who would never reveal the mysteries of the past, raised Halfdan as if he were his own son, teaching him to live with honor, with courage, and above all, with the wisdom of someone who knows that life can be unforgiving. From his earliest years, little Halfdan showed himself to be different. He did not conform to the simple life of the fisherman, with the tranquility of the calm waters, with the patience that fishing required. There was something about him, an energy that overflowed, an inner strength that made him a stranger in that world. The other boys looked at him with admiration, but also with some fear. He was growing fast, with a body that became increasingly imposing, his muscles beginning to define themselves in a way that was unusual for his age. At 10 years old, he was already stronger than many of the men in the village. His eyes, a deep blue, seemed to capture everything around him, as if he were constantly observing, as if he expected something more from life. His childhood was marked by loneliness. The old man, although he had taught him many lessons about respect for nature and others, had also prepared him for something greater. He never spoke directly about Halfdan's past, but the old man's eyes were always full of a deep mystery, as if they carried the weight of unspeakable secrets. Halfdan, for his part, felt that there was something beyond that village, something that called to him. During the long walks along the beaches, while the other fishermen cast their nets, he found himself immersed in thoughts about what his true origins could be. He couldn't fully understand it, but a feeling that he had been made for something great wouldn't leave him alone. During his adolescence, Halfdan's transformation was even more striking. He was no longer content with the simple life of a fisherman, with repetitive and unchallenging work. Instead, he began to train secretly, using pieces of wood and stones as improvised weapons, shaping his body with discipline. He did not want to be just a fisherman, a man limited by everyday life. He wanted more. He wanted to be like the legends he had heard on his few trips outside the village, like those great warriors in the stories, heroes who had faced the giants and the shadow monsters. But training was only the beginning. He wanted more than strength. He wanted to understand the truth about his lineage, the truth that his heart felt but that his mind could not fully understand. By the age of 18, Halfdan was practically unrecognizable. His body, with its toned muscles and surprising agility, no longer looked like that of a simple fisherman. He was a fighting machine, shaped by nature and training. His sword, given to him by the elder in the name of Tyr, was a powerful weapon. He wielded it with a skill that frightened even the most seasoned warriors in the village. However, it was not just his physical strength that made him formidable. It was his sharp mind, his keen instincts, and his constant desire to learn. He devoured everything he could about combat, tactics, and even runes and protective magic, all of which the elder taught him. But as Halfdan grew stronger and more skilled, something inside him tormented him. He no longer saw himself as a simple fisherman, nor as a simple man. The weight of his origin, although never confirmed in words, was beginning to be felt more strongly. He knew that destiny was calling him, but he did not know how, nor from where, nor when. The emptiness inside him was becoming increasingly unbearable, and he felt, with an immense certainty, that there was something more beyond the small waves breaking on the beaches of the village. As the sea murmured under the light of a pale sun, Halfdan looked at the horizon, feeling a force greater than himself calling him beyond the village. He knew that, somewhere, his destiny awaited him, and this journey, far from being simple, would challenge not only his physical strength, but his soul. Something told him that the future would bring more than he imagined. He was not just the son of a mortal and a god, but a man destined for great deeds. And soon, the winds of their destiny would begin to blow. The winds blowing over the lands of Midgard carried a sense of tension that no one could ignore. The skies were cloudy, and the sea, which until then had brought life and serenity to the shores of the fishermen, now seemed to throw violent waves against the rocks, as if nature itself were rebelling. Winter had come early that year, and with it, a cold darkness spread over the northern regions. It was as if something evil was preparing to invade the realm of men. The silence that preceded the disaster hung over the villages and forests of Midgard, as if everyone knew, deep down, that something terrible was about to happen. And they were right. The Jötunns, the giants of antiquity, had gathered, threatening not only the peace of Midgard, but the very survival of its people. The attack began without warning, like a thunderclap cutting through the night. A wild and relentless force, composed of the fearsome Jötunns, appeared in the lands of Midgard, bringing with it immense destruction. They were gigantic, almost immortal in their strength, their bodies coated in stone and ice, and their eyes, cold as the glacier of the north, shone with hatred and vengeance. The first villages to be attacked did not stand a chance. Their houses were crushed like straw, and the inhabitants, mostly fishermen and simple farmers, were torn apart without mercy. Within days, a trail of fire and blood snaked through the lands, and the Jötunns advanced, leaving a trail of death and destruction. That same night, the wise old man who had raised Halfdan, with his deep and knowledgeable gaze on the forces that govern the worlds, felt the weight of a divine presence. He sensed, in his spirit, that the time had come. A vision overtook him, and he saw Tyr himself, the god of justice and war, in a dark dream. In a deep and distant voice, Tyr spoke to the old man, telling him that it was time to send Halfdan to face the Jötunns. "He is the chosen one," Tyr said, "the bastard son, born to right the wrong I have done. He is the last hope for humanity. May Tyr's sword guide his son's hand, and may the fury of a god awaken within him. Send him into battle, now. Only he can save Midgard." That message was a command. The elder, with the wisdom gained over the years, knew that Halfdan's moment had come. He called him over, and for the first time, looked at the young man with a mixture of pride and concern, and told him the truth about his father. "Fate can no longer be avoided, Halfdan," the old man said, his voice full of gravity. "Tyr, your father, has a debt to repay. and you are the key to fulfilling his legacy. Go now, face the Jötunns, and bring the justice your father could not. Halfdan, who had trained his entire life to face challenges he did not even fully understand, felt something different when he heard those words. He felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but also the flame of vengeance. He knew deep down that the battle against the Jötunns would not be just a fight for survival, but a personal one. The sword of Tyr, which he now wielded masterfully, seemed to have more meaning than ever. He walked towards the battlefield, the wind cutting through his skin and the sky blotting out the sun, as if nature itself were in tune with the fury of the giants. By the time he reached the nearest village, the Jötunns were already in full attack. The houses were in flames, the screams echoed in the distance, and the giants, imposing and savage, were crushing everything in their path. Without hesitation, Halfdan raised his sword and advanced, the fury of 1,000 warriors burning within him. The combat was brutal. Every blow of Halfdan's sword cut through the giants with deadly precision. The sound of metal clashing against bodies of stone and ice was deafening. But Halfdan did not stop. He did not think, only acted, as if his own rage and destiny guided him. He felt the god's presence in his blood, and every movement of his sword seemed to be driven by Tyr's will. The battle lasted for hours, but in the end, Halfdan, with his fury and superhuman skill, defeated the Jötunns one by one, driving them from the lands of Midgard. The village was saved, but at a terrible cost. The blood of the giants stained the ground, and the wind carried the smell of death. But as Halfdan walked across the battlefield, amidst the carnage, something strange happened. A Jötunn, the last to be defeated, was still breathing. In his final breaths of life, he raised his head and, in a hoarse voice full of hatred, shouted, "Son of Tyr, you do not know the truth. What your father did, what he caused us. The hatred of the Jötunns is eternal, and you are nothing more than a bastard." Before Halfdan could react, the giant fell, his life extinguished in a final death rattle. But the words remained, echoing in Halfdan's mind like a storm. He felt the weight of those words like a blade embedded in his chest. He, the son of Tyr, a bastard. How could that be possible? Without fully understanding the meaning of those words, Halfdan returned to the village where he had been raised, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. When he confronted the elder, seeking answers, the old man, with a sad look on his face, finally revealed everything. He told the truth about Halfdan's origins, about the forbidden romance between Tyr and his mother, Astrid, a mortal warrior. He told of Tyr's past actions, about how the god had caused a great war between the Jötunns and Asgard, actions that the giants would never forgive. He told of the revenge that had dragged on for generations and how Halfdan, as Tyr's son, had been forged to right the wrongs of the past. "You are the only one who can right what your father did," the elder said sadly. "The Jötunns are still among us, and they will return. You must drive them from Midgard, forever, no matter the cost. You are the chosen one, Halfdan. Your sword is the last defense against complete destruction." The elder's words fell like a sentence on Halfdan, and for the first time, he understood the weight of his destiny. He was not just a warrior. He was the key to his father's redemption, and perhaps even to the salvation of Midgard. Now, he knew his journey was far from over. The Jötunns were still at war. Midgard, and he was the only one who could put an end to the threat once and for all. What he did from that moment on would be more than just a battle. It would be the fight of a lifetime, for justice, for honor, and perhaps for revenge for a man who had never known how to be a father. The winds of Midgard had changed, and with them, the spirit of the world itself. The years passed, But Halfdan's rage did not diminish. With each Jötunn that fell before his sword, he felt a momentary relief, but also a growing frustration, as if revenge, which should have been the answer to all his doubts and anger, was not enough. In time, he became the greatest monster hunter the Nine Realms had ever known. His fame spread like wildfire, not only across Midgard, but to every corner of the known lands. With each battle against a Jötunn, with each victory, he came closer to his ultimate goal, to eradicate the giant's presence from Midgard, where the blood of his father, Tyr, was still stained with betrayal and the pain of past mistakes. But as Halfdan advanced in his hunt, the shadow of the Jötunn king grew longer and more menacing. The colossal monster who ruled the giants with an iron fist watched Halfdan's victories with a growing fury, fueled by hatred and humiliation. Each Jötunn defeated was a direct blow to his throne, an insult to his reign that had been unchallenged for so many generations. The Jötunns, with their ancient culture of honor and strength, saw in Halfdan not just an enemy, but a son of Tyr, the god who had been responsible for the tragedy that had devastated them. To the king of the Jötunns, Halfdan was not just a hunter. He was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong for his race, and that could not be allowed. The king of the Jötunns, a colossal being with a strength capable of splitting the sky itself, was not content with the death of his sons. He began to send his forces to Midgard. Men and monsters, like gigantic shadows, marched towards the realm of men, but none of them returned. Those who set out to seek revenge against Halfdan never returned, consumed by the hunter's fury. The reports that reached the ears of the king of the Jötunns only increased his hatred. Each new messenger who spoke of the human hunter's deeds only fueled his determination to end it once and for all. For years, Halfdan roamed the frozen and dark lands, hunting down the last vestiges of the Jötunns that remained in Midgard. Each of his battles was more difficult than the last, for the giants, although rare, were growing more ferocious and aggressive. They knew that their extinction was imminent, and this made them even more dangerous. But Halfdan did not hesitate. Tyr's sword, now completely his, shone with a deadly glow with each movement. His every blow was an echo of the power of a god, an uncontrollable force that annihilated everything in its path. What began as a son's personal vendetta against his father's mistakes slowly turned into a quest to save Midgard from a threat that had lingered for ages. But at the same time, something inside Halfdan was beginning to break. He was no longer just a hunter of Jötunns. He was becoming the embodiment of the giant's own hatred for Tyr. And somehow, that anger was his own. He had killed so many, had so much death on his hands, that the line between Tyr's son and the monster he hunted seemed increasingly blurred. But as Halfdan delved deeper into his quest, the king of the Jötunns prepared for a final showdown, determined to put an end to this threat once and for all. He gathered every last vestige of his army, a legion of giants of superhuman strength and monsters who could destroy anything that dared challenge the king's throne. The plan was simple: march on Midgard and crush the hunter and everything he stood for once and for all. He knew that facing Halfdan would not be easy, but he also knew that the only way to make the Jötunns regain their lost honor was to defeat Tyr's son. If Halfdan were defeated, the Jötunns could resume their revenge, and perhaps even rebuild what they had lost. And so, like a storm about to break, the king of the Jötunns marched with his army towards Midgard. The land shook with the footsteps of the giants, and the winds howled as if foretelling imminent destruction. The king knew that this would be the last confrontation, and there was no turning back. He did not just want to destroy Halfdan. He wanted to destroy the idea that a man, any man, could defy the Jötunns and the gods who created them. But Halfdan, with the spirit of a tireless hunter, would not be intimidated. He knew that the final battle was approaching, and that it was on him that the full weight of honor, anger, and destiny would be concentrated. What began as simple revenge now became a fight for the survival of Midgard, for the balance between the worlds, and, above all, for the truth of who he really was. With Tyr's sword in his hands, Halfdan prepared for what would undoubtedly be the greatest challenge of his life. The Jötunns were coming, and with them, a new chapter in the fate of the world was about to be written. The hunter was ready to face the king of the Jötunns. But now, more than ever, he knew that the fight would not be against just the giants. It would be against the very legacy that his father had left. He felt it in every fiber of his being, and without further hesitation, he set out towards the final confrontation. In Asgard, the winds of war began to blow stronger, more violent, as if the very essence of the gods felt the weight of destiny. Tyr, the god of justice and war, was aware of what was about to happen in Midgard, and in his heart, anguish mixed with anger. He watched from the heights of his golden palace as the Jötunns, led by their monstrous king, prepared to invade Midgard. He knew that his son, Halfdan, the hunter who had been forged by pain and blood, could not face the immense army of giants alone. The man who had hunted with fury for so long now found himself facing a threat that would challenge even the gods. And Tyr, with the wisdom of eons and the weight of fatherhood, knew that only he and his brothers could save Midgard. Without hesitation, Tyr summoned the mightiest warriors of Asgard, the gods who had stood by his side in the most epic battles, and with a somber look, he said, "My brothers, the time has come. Midgard will be tested as never before. The fury of the Jötunns is uncontrollable, but together, we can stop them. Thor, my brother, you will be my right hand in this war. And those who seek the honor of Asgard, follow me. Let us meet our destiny. And may the lands of Midgard know that the gods will not abandon them." Thor, the god of thunder, whose golden hair seemed to reflect the light of the storms he controlled, appeared before Tyr with the fury of a storm about to break. His hammer, Mjolnir, seemed to pulse with an energy that caused tremors in the very earth. Beside him, the other gods and warriors of Asgard were ready to fight. Freya, the goddess of war and wisdom, with her golden cloak like the sun, marched with the confidence of a lioness on the hunt. Vidar, the son of vengeance, with his iron legs, walked fearlessly, his gaze fixed on his goal. And Loki, the god of trickery, with his mysterious smile, knew that the war would be an opportunity to test his own cunning. Odin himself, the father of all, with his deep and immortal gaze, watched from his throne, knowing that this confrontation was inevitable. He trusted his sons, but he also knew that the future of Midgard now rested on Halfdan's shoulders. And so, with the strength of Asgard gathered, Tyr and his brothers descended towards the realm of men, ready to fight alongside their lost son. Meanwhile, in Midgard, Halfdan prepared for what he knew would be the last confrontation of his life. The Jötun army was approaching, a mass of monsters and giant warriors, each one more immense than the last, their shadows taking over the horizon. The earth shook beneath their feet, and the sky seemed to darken with the promise of a bloody storm. Knowing that the battle was about to begin, Halfdan, with the weight of his lineage and the spirit of a fearless warrior, ordered the coastal villages of the north to retreat, to protect the innocent. He was ready to face the Jötunns alone, but a sense of something greater in the air made him take a deep breath. He knew that this would be no ordinary battle. He was fighting not only for the survival of Midgard, but for the redemption of his father Tyr's name. The calm that preceded the storm was broken by a boom so powerful that it shook even the earth. A colossal thunder tore through the sky, and out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning descended, illuminating the horizon with a blinding light. It was Thor, the god of thunder, with Mjolnir raised above his head. Beside him, Tyr, with his sword forged in the furnaces of Asgard itself, stood ready to face the approaching evil. They were followed by the other gods, who appeared as powerful figures, like a divine army. Freya, with her warlike smile and fierce eyes, advanced with the strength of an eagle in full flight, while Vidar, with his iron boots, seemed almost indestructible. Loki, always with his mischievous smile, was a spectre that appeared and disappeared among the shadows, like a cunning hunter in search of his prey. Halfdan, who was already in position, looked up to the sky and saw the arrival of the gods, a celestial army descending from the heavens like a force of nature. He did not hesitate. The anger and honor that had guided him until that moment were now transformed into a greater purpose. He stood before the gods themselves, and for the first time he felt no shame in his lineage. He felt the strength of Tyr in his veins, and knew that, alongside the gods, he would not only win, but destroy the Jötunns and free Midgard from the scourge that had plagued the realms for so long. The battle that followed was a spectacle worthy of legend. The ground shook with the impact of the Jötunns' feet, and their iron and steel weapons cut through the air like lightning, as the gods fought alongside Halfdan. Tyr, with his sword, was a storm of steel, cutting down stone giants as if they were made of clay. Each blow of his blade was like the burden of forgotten justice, and the giants fell like trees cut down by the roots. He fought with uncontrollable fury, but also with the wisdom of a god, without giving in to anger, as his son did. Thor, with Mjolnir in hand, created tornadoes of lightning and thunder with each blow. His attacks were so powerful that the Jötunns were thrown back, their bodies crushed by the waves of energy he generated. He fought like a storm, furious, unbeatable. Freya, in her golden cloak, advanced with deadly precision, her blades cutting like a war dance. Her every move was a lesson in grace and destruction, and the giants fell before her as if they could not even comprehend her lethal beauty. Vidar fought with immense strength, his iron legs stomping the ground and crushing everything in his path. His roar was louder than thunder itself, and he advanced without stopping, cutting down any enemy who dared to approach. Loki, on the other hand, was unpredictable and cunning, creating illusions and traps that confused and disoriented the Jötunns. He fought not with brute force, but with cunning, causing chaos and disorder on the battlefield. And in the midst of this storm of gods and giants, Halfdan fought alongside his father, Tyr. He wielded Tyr's sword with godlike fury, his blows imprecise and lethal. His every attack was a demonstration of his divine blood, and he did not hesitate. He knew that his fight was not just against the Jötunns, but against the shame of his origins, and, most importantly, against the mistakes of his father's past. In the midst of the battle, the king of the Jötunns appeared, a colossal figure who seemed to be made of pure rage and destruction. His eyes were two pools of fire, and his roar made even the gods tremble. He was the embodiment of hatred, and he marched towards Halfdan and Tyr, his wrath reflected in his ice sword. The Jötunns retreated, forming a circle around their leaders, and the battle gave way to an epic clash between father and son against the greatest of the giants. The Jötunn king swung his sword with devastating force, and each blow seemed capable of tearing apart the earth itself. But Halfdan, with Tyr's sword in his hands, faced the giant with courage, while his father, Tyr, fought with precise strategy, seeking to weaken the king's brute strength. Together, father and son fought as one, their every move reflecting the strength of their lineage, the fury of a god, and the determination of a man. After a long and bloody struggle, the Jötunn king, weakened by battle and by the union of Tyr and Halfdan, finally fell. Tyr's sword, guided by his son's hand, cut through the giant's heart, and with a final roar, he succumbed to death. The remaining Jötunns, seeing their fallen leader, retreated, leaving Midgard in peace. With victory achieved, Tyr looked at his son, the warrior who had defeated Midgard's greatest enemies. Halfdan, he said with a solemn smile, you fought like a god. The honor of Asgard is yours, and your position among us is assured. Come live in Asgard and be part of our family. But Halfdan, his eyes filled with a gleam of understanding, shook his head. I cannot, father, he replied, his voice firm. Midgard needs me. I am the guardian of this land, and it is here that my sword will remain, as a symbol of my promise to defend this realm against any threat. Tyr looked at his son with respect and pride. So be it. You will always have a place in Asgard. But if your choice is to protect Midgard, then so be it. May Tyr's sword guide your hand. And with those words, Halfdan, the hunter of Jötunns, became the eternal guardian of Midgard, swearing that until his last breath, he would maintain peace between men and gods. Did you like this story? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next epic sagas. The journey continues.